So you're going to have to determine the best stitch type, the proper settings, as well as the proper sequence. Once you have completed your basic analysis, then you can sit down and actually create the elements of the artwork using the computer's program, your software tools, and a mouse. Now, the artwork images that we are going to concentrate on today are going to be what we call graphic file formats. So with a graphic file format, realize it is a piece of artwork that is made up of a series of pixels or dots. So we're going to look at JPEGs, bitmap, TIFF files. When they are viewed at their original size, oftentimes they are legible. But realize when you start to blow those dots up, they start to separate and they may become fuzzy and blurry. So when you're bringing your artwork in, obviously the best clear artwork you can get is what you want. What you want to try and avoid doing is taking a little 1-inch design on a business card and trying to blow that up to a jacket back size. You will not see one clear piece on that image. It's just going to look like a bunch of dots that are separated. Everything's going to look jagged. So again, you want to at least bring the artwork in the exact size that you are going to digitize, or bring it to the screen larger and shrink it, because you're going to have a better time with that view than you will going the opposite way. As far as drawing modes go, the drawing modes that you are going to be using today is really going to be what we call the quick draw mode, which is the letter Q when you are using any of the digitizing tools such as your run, your complex fill, steels, or satin paths. Again, for those of you with higher levels of software, you may have other tools, and again, those tools will be covered during your intermediate class. So again, with our basics, we are going to stick to what everyone can accomplish by hand. So again, with some of those other tools, just remember they will be available to the higher levels and covered in some of the other classes. Now, as far as our running stitch goes, your running stitch is your most basic stitch type. It is usually something that looks very similar to what comes off of a sewing machine. It's a single row of stitches. They are commonly used for creating outlines, fine details, and also what we call a traveling route. They can actually be straight or curved. And if you're looking at a piece of artwork and trying to determine what stitch type it should be, think of your running stitches as something you would draw with a fine tip pencil or pen. Again, your running stitches are created when you are placing these anchor points along a given path, but the anchor points themselves are not going to represent every needle penetration. The needle penetrations themselves are going to be determined by the stitch length and something called the drop run stitch. So let's go ahead and jump into our software here. We're going to start a new file. Again, with anything else, if you feel comfortable using your recipes and that's something you want to do, you can definitely select one before you begin creating your digitized product. Now, when you bring artwork to your screen, you're going to come up here to Image and Load. And from there, it's asking you, where is your artwork? So again, wherever it is that you have stored your artwork is where you are going to go look for it. So we're going to start off with our Shapes 1 exercise. Now, when you bring something onto your screen, realize that what you've done is placed a piece of white paper on your screen. So literally, if I go ahead and change the background here, you're going to see that here's the piece of white paper. So it's going to be very important when you bring artwork to your screen that it is cropped so that you can visually see exactly what you are going to digitize without any excess around it. The more excess you have around it, the more likely it is it's going to be difficult for you to start putting in the size, because it's always going to resize the whole paper. It doesn't recognize anything on the paper. It just sees the piece of paper. So again, just for your benefit, to make it easy when you're resizing art, I would go ahead and crop it to exactly the size of the artwork at that moment in time. So again, just don't leave a lot of excess paper when you go ahead and bring that in. Now, when you go to resize artwork, you're going to see up at the top you have image, and there's a tool called backdrop select. So when you're in backdrop select, you're going to get a new cursor. Again, when you right click on your screen, you're going to get a drop down. So in the drop down, obviously the first thing we can do is delete. So just like it sounds, you are deleting the artwork from the screen. So sometimes after people are done creating whatever it is that they are creating, and they've sewn it out, it's been approved by the customer, they don't want to save that art in the file anymore. They just want to get rid of it. So that's delete here. Now rotate and resize here are literally having you go ahead and spin the art. So again, if I click on rotate, it wants me to physically spin this around in order to rotate it. Then we have resize. Again, the same thing there. It's expecting you to drag this in or out and watch the bottom of your screen. Now your flip is going to be your mirror image. So you can flip horizontally and you can flip vertically. The one most people are using is going to be reference tool, because it's a real easy way for you just to type in exactly what you want. So if you know what it is that you're trying to do, instead of dragging things around, watching the bottom of your screen, you can go ahead and type. So you can type in an exact rotation, or you can type in a size here. So let's say I want this to be 6 inches tall, and I'm going to click on resize. Again, once you do that, close the box. If you don't, it's going to continue to do that until you've got this massive design and you have no idea all of a sudden how it got to be 100 inches. Now, as far as zooming in and zooming out, please remember that the zoom tool up here is a mode. So as far as what does that mean for you, when you are using this zoom tool while you are plotting points, even if you were not done with the shape, it has now finished the shape for you, because it has to get out of what you were doing and into the zoom mode. So the better way to do it is to use the tools next to it, which actually are the plus and minus keys on your numeric keypad, or you will be able to come in here and use the track wheel on your mouse. That can be set in your user settings for zoom in and zoom out, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to do that. And it can be done at any point. So if you're in the middle of digitizing something and you realize you have to zoom in, you can use that track wheel and it is not going to shut you out of your design. So we're going to start off with our first shape here. So we're going to get our run tool. We are going to select our color. And we're going to start left clicking to plot our points. So we're going to left click to start this. Then we're going to hold our shift key down. Your shift key will actually allow you to be within 15 degrees. So it's really easy to keep things straight this way. So you continue to hold your shift key as you plot the points in the corners. Now, the last one, you are going to want to close this type of a shape. So to close your shape, you are going to hit the letter O on your keyboard. As soon as you hit the letter O on your keyboard, it's going to weld the first and last point together. Then you can hit your Enter key. The minute you hit your Enter key, you're going to get a green arrow. The green arrow is asking you to left click wherever you want this to start sewing. Then you get a red arrow. With the red arrow, you're going to left click where you want this to stop sewing. When you're done, you're going to hit the letter S for select, and it will get you out of what you were doing. So like we said, you are in charge, so you are going to have to make sure that the settings are correct. So let's go ahead and look at some of the settings that you would have to go ahead and apply. So first of all, it's up to you to put in lock stitches. So we can come over here to our Connections tab. You're going to see there's a start lock and an end lock. Anytime it mentions the word start, that means it is connected to the green bead. Anytime it mentions the word stop or end, it is connected to the red triangle. So we're going to go in here and put in our line lock stitches. And then we're going to go to our Commands tab, and we're going to put in a trim. So again, those are things that you are going to have to do because you are now the digitizer and you have to put all of that stuff into your designs. As far as the run style goes, so with your run style, what you're going to see is it is going to determine how many times it's going to go around here. So in this case, with a regular run, you have what we call movable start and stop beads. So with your regular run, it's going to start where the green dot is, so all the way around, and then come back over and stitch over itself to end at the red triangle. Now, if you want to make it bolder, so let's say you're using this as an outline or a detail, you can't just add pole comp or something like that to a running stitch to make it bolder. It doesn't have that capability because it's a single line of stitching. The only thing you could do is sew over yourself. So to do that, you can switch the style. So the next one in line is 2-ply. The minute you hit 2-ply, you're going to notice your red triangle disappeared because it is literally sewing over itself twice. So that's why it has to start and stop exactly in the same place. The next one we have after that is your bean stitch. Again, with your bean stitch, you do have movable start and stop points. And if we look at how this actually stitches, you're going to see that it's going to start going forward. That's actually our lock stitch. So it goes forward and backs up 1. So it's forward, backs up 1. So that is what a bean stitch is doing. Now there is a half bean. A half bean, and again, in this case, you can see it kind of does something crazy because it is only allowed to do a long stitch and then it backs up 1. So in this case, it's actually going to overshoot it. So you're going to have to see in different circumstances it works well. But again, it's long stitch, short stitch, long stitch, short stitch. Again, in this case, at the stitch length and the size we're doing this, it's not a good choice. But again, it is something that is available. And in some designs, it's not only going to give you that same look, but also save you some stitches. Now, as far as our needle up goes, again, the Tajima machines know that when you stop doing something and you go to the next area, it knows to lift the needle out of the fabric. Again, because we sell to customers who don't necessarily have Tajima machines, we have to allow for them to be able to tell their machines whatever it needs for it to do. Now, as far as the number of needle penetrations that we have, again, that's determined by the stitch length. So again, the default stitch length is 0.12 inches. So what it's doing is it's sewing as many of these stitches at 0.12 as it can, and then it's looking for what we call the drop run stitch. This is unique just for running stitches, and what happens is as you are plotting a point, it assumes you're putting a point there in order to keep the integrity of what the shape looks like. So it is going to force a needle penetration everywhere there is an anchor point. So most of the time, that's great. So what happens is if it has to shorten the stitch to drop a point there, it will. But if you happen to be that person who goes ahead and says, okay, what I'm going to do is put 1,000 points to get a circle. When you do that, you are going to have an issue because there is not going to be a consistent stitch length. It has to physically drop a stitch everywhere there's an anchor point. So if you happen to be that person who is going to put tons and tons of points in, instead of add anchor, you may want to go ahead and set it for none. In my case, it actually ends up cutting things off because I don't have extra needle penetrations in there. But again, for those of you who have tons of needle penetrations, then it's going to smooth that out and put in only the stitch length there. So let's go ahead and do some more examples of this. Good question. For those of you who are not automatically in Quick Draw, then what you're going to do is select your stitch type. So if you don't see that curve like I have, you're going to hit Q on your keyboard for Quick Draw. So once you have that curve, when you left click, you get a straight point. When you right click, you get a curve. So I'm going to select my color and I'm going to start plotting my points. Again, this is actually within 15 degrees, so I can still hold my shift key, hit the letter O to close, hit the enter key, tell it where I want to start, where I want to stop, and then come in and put in the lock stitches and trims. So when you get into a curve, you're going to select your stitch type, select your color, you're going to left click to start it, and then you're going to start right clicking to get around the curve. Again, if you have to, you can always backspace. O to close, hit the enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, hit S for select. Again, you can put in your lock stitches and trims. Now in this case, because we have a curve, sometimes it wants to cut off our curve. So we can actually switch from the add anchor to something called cord gap, and that is going to shorten up the stitches around the curve over there so that you can easily come in and have a nice smooth curve at those points. Come back here to our run, pick our color, left click, right click in the curve, right click in a curve, right click in a curve, click up at the top, hit O to close, then hit your enter key. Tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop. Again, then we can put in our lock stitches and trims. Now these three things that are below it, the three lines, again, because they're lines, they're not a closed shape. Again, the ones at the top were closed. These are just going to be straight lines. And if you were to close these lines, it would literally sew through the center of them. So when you're doing a run, you have an option on whether or not to close something. Again, you're going to see when we get to our satin paths and our complex fills that they are always closed. Again, once you get to the end, you're left clicking at the end, you're hitting the enter key. Again, then you can just get out of it. You're not going to close it. You're just going to come in and put in your lock stitches and trims. Left click to start it, and then you're going to right click in all the high and low points of your curves. Does anyone have any questions on our running stitches? Again, if you do have questions, please post those questions in the chat box. Okay, if not, we are going to look at our next stitch type, which is our satin path. So again, with our satin path, what you have is a series of stitches that zigzag back and forth from one side of the column to the next. They have a raised appearance and are commonly used for creating lettering and covering small areas. They are also used to create borders. Your satin paths have multiple angle lines so that they are able to contour and curve throughout the segment. So if you're looking at your artwork and trying to decide if it should be a satin path, just think of those as something you would draw with a narrow paintbrush. Now always remember that the satin paths need to be closed, and they are defined by those two parallel sides, and that's where the stitches are going in between. Again, a true satin cannot be any longer than a ½ inch or your machine is going to want to trim it. So again, you do have to be aware of the limitations when you're looking at that. So if we jump back into our piece of art here and go down to our next shape, we can pick our satin path tool, pick our color, left click to start it. Again, right click in the curves, left click in the points. So we're coming around here. O to close, hit the enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and then you have to left click and drag to put in your angles. So again, you can put in your lock stitches and your trim. So again, you are left clicking in the straight points, right clicking in the curved points. O to close, hit the enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop. G for generate. So again, you are going ahead, you are selecting your stitch type, selecting your color, left click to start it, and again, right click in all the high and low points of your curves. O to close, hit the enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and again, left click and drag to put in all of the angles. Now, as far as the patterns, again, if we put this in 3D, you can see that this is a regular satin pattern with a true satin going on here. With the next one, you're going to see that within the standard pattern selections, you can come in and pick something that is going to be a fill pattern. So again, it still is turning because again, that is what a satin stitch does, but it's allowing you to apply a fill pattern to the shape. And other than our standard patterns, you can also select our carved tile patterns. And from there, you're going to see that when you have the carved tile, that there's a special carved tile tab. And from here, you can select from the different items and have the different patterns apply. Now, when you get into some of these big patterns like this, you may want to apply your quality control in case some of those stitches inside get too long. So under quality control, you can still go in and select random and tell it what you feel is the longest satin stitch that you are willing to have it sew. So here, if it has to, it will add any extra needle penetrations that it needs to. Does anyone have any questions? Again, if you do have questions, please post the questions in the chat box. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, if not, we will go into our next stitch type. Again, our next stitch type is our complex fill. Again, with your complex fill stitches, they are a series of multiple short stitches that sew back and forth in order to cover a large area. They're most commonly used for large pieces and complex pieces. Now just realize that they are going to lay completely flat and they will always produce a much higher stitch count. So the other thing you need to remember about those complex fills is that you will only get one angle line. So it doesn't matter if the shape is curved or straight, they will always only have one angle. Again, just think of your complex fill stitches as something you would draw with a can of spray paint. Now, the actual term complex fill is also used to describe a process the computer is doing. So with a complex fill, you can draw an extremely complex shape. And if the software needs to go ahead and divide that shape up and do running stitches between those areas, it will go ahead and do that. So let's actually explore that first. So we're going to start a new file. Then what we're going to do is we are going to get our complex fill tool. And again, you can draw any crazy shape that you want. That shape can have curves. It can have straight pieces. It can have whatever you need. Again, make sure that it's closed. So you're going to hit the letter O to close it, and then hit your Enter key. Once you've hit your Enter key, you have to tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and you get one angle. So you'll see, based on the angle, how it can fill it in. So see how it's changing the way that it's stitching? So let's go ahead and watch this stitch out on the screen. So if we slow it down, you're going to see it divide up that shape as it needs to. You see how it's breaking that apart? So let's go in. We're going to start another new file. And let's do some complex fills without holes. Then we're going to get into our complex fills with holes as well as our satin path with holes. So when you are creating things with your complex fill, again, you're going to start going around the outside of your shape. You're going to hit O to close, hit your Enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and you get that one angle. Okay, everybody see that? So again, it doesn't matter if it is straight or curved. It is, oops, here's our, so you're going around the shape. O to close, hit the Enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and your angle. Right, if you hide it so you get the different pieces here. Now, when you're doing your complex fills, like we said previously, we have the regular fill patterns. We will also be able to go in and do the carves, just like we were doing in the last shapes that we were doing as satins. And we also have the capability of doing program stitches. Again, when you're doing a program stitch, it is a see-through pattern, and you can see that it is going to be an open weave type pattern. So let's go ahead and look at when we have holes in things. Let's load another image. So I'm going to go to our backdrop select, go to reference tool, so let's start with this one down here. So when you have anything with holes, what you're going to do is you are going to go around the outside first. So you're going to select your tool, again, select your color, and you're going to start going around the outside of your shape. O to close. 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 Now, this is the last one. So now we hit our Enter key. We're going to tell it where we want to start, where we want to stop, and our angle. So again, anytime you're working, you're always going to go around the outside of your shape. O to close. O to close. Hit the Enter key. Tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and your angle. So again, you're always going around the outside. O to close. Go around the inside. O to close. Hit the Enter key. Oh, I guess it would say I didn't close something. That's what happens when you don't close things. Let's go ahead and try that again. If you don't close things, it doesn't quite know what to do. There we go. Now, as far as plotting the points, it's going to be exactly the same when you're doing satin paths as it is with a complex fill. The differences are going to come in when you do not have something that is going to be an actual curve that's going to be continuous. If you have to hold your shift key, then somebody has switched you over to the old shortcuts. So that's up to you. If you wanted to work with the old shortcuts, you can do that. Otherwise, what you're going to end up having to do is just use your shift key. Again, it's up to you if you don't want to use that. So the new shortcut keys for the software are the ones that are going to have you left clicking for a straight point, right clicking for a curved point. And again, you have to be in Quick Draw in order for that to work. So even with your satin path here, if you are not in Quick Draw, you're going to have to hit the letter Q. Then you're going to have to start going around the outside of your shape. O to close. O to close. Hit the Enter key. Tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop. And generate. Now, if you want to switch out of the old shortcuts and into the ones that are normally set up for your software, then you're going to go into Tools, Configuration, and User Settings. You're going to click on the little plus sign next to environment, and where it says shortcuts, you're going to click on there and say apply standard. So again, your standard shortcuts are the ones that we go over during class. If you want to go back to the old ones, then you're going to again have to have hopefully already known the old shortcuts. They were really only left there so people that had already been using the software would not have to relearn shortcuts. But right, Pulse changed them out themselves. They've gone ahead and gone with the newer shortcuts. So we are going to go ahead, and again, this is a continuous one for a satin path. So again, you're going to left click, right click at the curve, right click at the curve, O to close, O to close, hit the enter key, tell it where you want to start, where you want to stop, and then you get your angle lines. So again, the only differences are going to come in with satin paths when you have things that need to be broken up into multiple pieces. So something like an A, a P, an R, those you're going to have to go in and add in the virtual slice lines. O to close. O to close. Hit the enter key. You can plot your start and stop points, but then you're going to need to go in and grab your virtual slice tool, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. I need to look at this because I overshot this. There. D for direction lines. And then make sure you put in all of your direction lines. So again, I is how we're hiding our image. So again, the same thing when you come in with a P. You're going to go around the outside. O to close. O to close. Hit the enter key. Then we're going to get our virtual slice. Left click and drag. And come up and around with our angle lines. O to close. O to close. Hit the enter key. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay. If not, we are actually at a really good time to stop and let you take a quick break. So we're going to give you a 15